There we go. So welcome to our September New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative Technical Assistance Chat, Coffee Chat. I am Samantha Chrysler, the Communications Specialist for New Jersey Sea Grant, and I am helping NJCRC launch this Coffee Chat program through facilitation and meeting planning. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. The NJCRC is a network of coastal resilience professionals, and the purpose of this Coffee Chat program is to better facilitate connections between local communities, stakeholders who need technical assistance needs with NJCRC members who can assist those needs. We have a few speakers today on our agenda, but before we get started, I want to introduce Ed, our co-chair, and he'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Samantha, and welcome everyone to this continuing series of coffee chats on a periodic basis. This is a feature of our mission as the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative, and it's a point of very high interest with our membership. During our polling, most of our members really wanted to have networking opportunities and sharing of best practices and accomplishments in the field so that we could share these developments and allow people to do them on a local or regional level. This is also a key element in our contract with New Jersey DEP because they hope to reach municipalities through the efforts of sharing information, developments, and research that comes about from members of our participating network. And today, I just want to add one feature that I think Tony McDonald and Tim Dillingham, my two co-chairs, agree with. This is the first time we've coupled the coffee chat with an actual subsequent field visit. And that is very helpful because you get to take the mental concepts you have and the explanations you receive and then see it in person. And finally, in conclusion, this topic today is one that's been talked about, planned for many municipalities over the last several years, and everyone has been trying to figure out how to do this. So I'm especially happy that our presenters today have agreed to do this because this is something that will be replicated, and it is very helpful for a variety of important reasons in the resiliency effort in New Jersey. So thank you very much to the presenters. And with that, we'll turn it back to you, Samantha, and move on.
Thanks, Ed. So I'm going to introduce our three fantastic speakers for our coffee chat today. First off is Nick Brown. He is the Director of Coastal Geology and Resiliency at ACT Engineering in Marmora, New Jersey. He has his PhD in coastal geology from FAU, and Nick is responsible for much of ACT's coastal work, which operates at the federal, state, and local level. Their coastal work includes restoration projects, local resilience and adaptation initiatives, and advocating for resilience-minded policy. We also have Suzanne Biggins, the Supervising Environmental Specialist at NJDEP Division of Land Resource Protection, Office of Dredging and Sediment Technology. She has been working for the NJDEP for 33 years and has since in 2002 as the Supervising Environmental Specialist, Office of Dredging and Sediment Technology. The office regulates all dredging in tidal waters and also regulates all dredged material management facilities and beneficial use of dredged material products in the state of New Jersey. She was the DEP project manager for the issuance of the necessary dredging projects for this Brick Township-wide dredging project. And dredging is in her blood and loves to see projects like this one come together in municipalities. And then last but not least, we have Alyssa Cummins, works for the Township Engineer and Floodplain Manager for the Township of Brick in Ocean County, New Jersey. Having served as the consultant for Brick since 2001, she was hired in 2013 to aid the township's recovery from Superstorm Sandy. Soon after being hired, she became a certified floodplain manager and a member of NJAFM. She continues to work with residents, developers, and realtors regarding navigating floodplain regulation, flood insurance requirements, and the day-to-day struggles associated with living with tidal and nuisance flooding. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to our speakers so they can talk to you about their Brick Township-wide dredging project. Thanks, and let's give it away.
So I guess I'll go first. We have more miles of coastline in New Jersey than any other municipality in the state. I believe at mean tide, we are 103 miles of coastline from the last we measured, which means with a lot of coast, a lot of waterfront, we need a lot of dredging. We had 5 target areas in Brick that we knew were terrible at low tide, like we had 0 water at low tide. And the town had talked forever about helping people with getting the permit applications in place, because to get a permit as a single family homeowner or a marina owner or a homeowners association, it's monumental. You have to do your hydrographic survey, test the material sometimes, get a DEP permit, get an Army Corps permit, and then you can hire a contractor once you have all that in place. So we historically had agreed that we would help people. We had 5 key locations in town, and I was coming up with estimates of $300,000 to $500,000 to get all the permitting in place for this. And I half jokingly said to the administration, at that rate, we should just do the whole town. And they said, okay. And I couldn't believe it. But we then hired ACT engineers who really helped us get our hands around the ball and get the ball rolling. With that, we did a hydrographic survey of the entire municipality. We did soil grain size analysis for the entire municipality. And we came up with a material management sampling plan. So when chemical analysis is required, we know what we have to do. We haven't actually done that testing yet, but we know what we have to do when we want to dredge in certain locations. And I'm proud to say we got our DEP permit almost a year ago. And we actually just got a draft of our Army Corps permit yesterday. So that's really exciting. We can actually get moving and make this process easier for single family homeowners who want to dredge. You can now come to the township, or not now, but it's very soon you'll be able to come to the municipality and apply to the township to get a permit to dredge your dock or your marina or what have you, and work under the jurisdiction of the township's permits with the state and the federal government, obviously with oversight and guidance from inspections to make sure you don't do anything that would violate those permits. There are areas in town where no one single family homeowner will take responsibility for dredging. It's like the mouth of a lagoon that serves a larger community or a larger population base. And in situations like that, the township has agreed to take the lead, understanding that while we've already paid all the permit fees and what have you, the actual cost of the dredging, we can't pay for. So while we agree to do the construction and we bond the money up front, the cost of the actual dredging project is back charged to residents through a tax assessment, a special assessment distributed amongst the community that benefits. In this particular case, we did Nejecho Lagoon, which is a community of approximately 30 homeowners. The material was rated by grain size to be predominantly sand, over 90% sand or less than 10% fine material. And it was suitable for disposal at Windward Beach, which is a public riverfront park about 2 miles upstream and down the river from Nejecho. And with that, I will turn this over to Nick because he looks like he's ready to go with actual technical discussion.
No, I was just trying to give you something that you can talk off of. You're okay.
Okay, so the
I've got you covered here.
The Nejecho Lagoon is located on the south side of the Njdep River. It was estimated that we had approximately 2,000 yards of material to remove from the lagoon. About 1,000 of that was in the mouth. But with respect to dredging, while we were there, we figured we would just do the entire lagoon. So that was the crux of our contract, was to dredge the mouth of the lagoon and the balance of the leg and collect the material, and then we trucked it to Windward Beach. Now, Windward Beach is a riverfront park, and it's very popular. We have our Summerfest concerts here. The beach is used daily. Our farm market is here. It's a beautiful site. So to deposit, even though it's 90% sand, but to deposit 2,000 yards of fresh dredge material in the middle of the summer on this beach was not a keen concept to a lot of the mayor and council and our recreation director. So it would act put in the contract that all of like a foot of material would just be scraped across the entire beach and stockpiled. And then the dredge material was spread. And then when that process was completed, the original sand was placed back over it. So you couldn't even see that it was there. And that is the crux of the contract from this point.
I will go after you. Sorry, I'm getting that slideshow turned back around. I
Okay.
thought I should pull those up while you're talking about them, and I've got the nice images.
Just the concept that we could actually use this material and put it to beneficial reuse was huge for us. Anyone who's ever done a dredging project knows one of your biggest hurdles is finding an end location for material. If you pay, you can pay to truck it, you can pump it, but if you don't have a place to put it, you actually may wind up paying to dispose of it at a landfill, which can be quite expensive. The tipping fees can be anywhere between $13 if you're lucky enough to have a dredge hole per cubic yard to upwards of $55. And that's if your material is clean. So the idea that we had material that was clean and sand and met the criteria for beach restoration was really quite a bonus for us in this particular project.
It definitely is a really good thing to have that nice clean material. So I will be giving a little bit more structured presentation because I don't know it as well as Alyssa does. So there's some needs here in this presentation, which is that public waterway access that Alyssa mentioned. And this includes private slips, properties, and marinas. I'm going to go over the process of getting this permit from the township level and from the consulting firms level. And then the outcomes and benefits, which include obviously navigation, the cost efficiency of having this township-wide dredge permit, the beneficial use material potential, and the planning that you can do, and then the relationships that you can establish with NGOs and regulators and other folks. So obviously we have a need for navigation and recreation as sediment is constantly deposited from rivers and other tributaries, and then also deposited through ebb and flood currents through the inlets that come from the ocean. The city of Brick has 43 waterways or 43 city or municipality waterways and more than 2,000 residential properties and numerous marinas that are within this permitted area. And this township of Brick relies on local economy, or the local economy rather, relies on tourism and fishing and other recreation that's often associated with the waterways. So making sure that they're clear and accessible is incredibly important. And the dredging helps maintain these waterways and ensure access to them. So when we look at this permit process, we have 6 key steps that occur. And in a municipality without a township or citywide dredge permit, each individual property owner who needs their dredging to maintain their property would likely have to complete all of these steps separately from the municipality, which is very costly and time consuming. The township of Brick put forth a significant amount of funding for the survey work, the engineering, soil sampling, permitting, and pursuit of the disposal locations that Alyssa mentioned. And this was all in an effort to have cost savings for the residents and make sure that the dredging can occur very easily and efficiently. So basically, after this whole process, the residents get to jump right to the hiring the contractor. They get to jump right to step 6 with a local permit. So the first step that we have to do is the bathymetric surveys to identify the current depths. And we see an image here on the right where these baseline bathymetric surveys are completed throughout the entire township for over more than 100 miles of channels that are surveyed using both multi-beam and single beam bathymetric surveys to understand the bathymetry of city channels. On the right here, we have the Jersey Shore Marina. And then here on the left, we have the Lightning Jacks Marina. The warmer colors are more shallow and the cooler colors are deeper. And then we have some residential areas here with Shore Acres on the left. And then on the right, we have Superior Lagoon. So these bathymetric surveys are really important to do because as you can see, the depths vary significantly, especially in this far right image where we have shallow on the outside of this residential area, but inside where the sediment isn't able to flow and be deposited as much is a lot deeper. So the next step in this that's kind of paired with the bathymetry is the testing of soils to be dredged for the grain size and potential contamination. The township-wide dredging plan allows for cost savings because you can reduce the number of samples that you have to take in the first place. So beyond knowing the grain size distribution and being able to use that for beneficial use, you get to reduce the number of grain size, saving money for the municipality, and then ultimately saving money for the people who are residents of that municipality. Within the next step here is the developing of a dredge plan. This includes the bathymetry, this includes the dredge grain size, or the grain size to be dredged rather. And all of those components are really important in the dredge plan, along with identifying a disposal site. Alyssa alluded to some of the disposal site issues that can occur where you're paying a lot of money to move sediment out of the area. There are a few disposal sites within Brick Township that include dredge hole number 25, CDFs, and then unloading or offsite facilities, as Alyssa mentioned, which are very costly at times. The way that we would like to use sediment and the way that the state of New Jersey and the township of Brick would like to use it is for beneficial reuse. This is often cheaper. It results in not only cost savings, but it also results in a benefit to the area. So on the right here, I'll dive into this a little bit more later, but you can use the sediment if the grain size matches for marsh enhancement, which is really cool. With our permit process, the two permits that we need are through the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. And the permits that you are applying for are for maintenance dredging of navigational waterways. As I said, the agencies are the DEP and the Corps, your local Corps district, whether that be Philly or New York. The DEP permits are 5 years with a potential 5-year extension, and the Army Corps are 10-year permits. So they allow for a lot of time to not only recoup the costs of the township that made the initial investment, but they also allow for a lot of planning to occur if you did have ideas for marsh enhancement projects or restoration projects to get those designs built up before the actual dredging occurs. So the proposal here is over 10 years, they will maintain more than 50 acres of back bay, channels, private slips, and marina waterways, and remove approximately 1.8 million cubic yards of sediment to 5 foot below the mean water line, with a 1 foot over dredge allowance to a max of -6 mean low water. So after all of that work that the township does, we get to jump right to the hiring the contractor, or at least as a resident in the area, you can jump right to hiring the contractor, with a small asterisk because you still have to now do local permits, but that saves you from doing all the bathymetry, all of the federal permits, and all of the other stuff. So with the local permits, you, as a resident, can basically go work with the city or the municipality and township to work with a contractor. And once you are all on the same page, you can fill out the local permit that's necessary and the form that's needed and the volume that's going to be dredged. And once that's all agreed upon, there's a nominal application fee to help recoup some of the costs that the township spent to get this down to a local level only. And then from there, you can use pre-qualified contractors that are experienced, licensed, have the equipment, and also comply with all of the permit requirements to actually dredge your areas. One of the really cool things is that the inspection fees are on a per cubic yard basis, but this per cubic yard basis is on a gradient. So the more that you dredge, the less it costs to inspect it and to make sure when it leaves, basically it is what it is. So it saves a ton of money if a whole bunch of residents in one lagoon were going to band together and do one large dredging project, because it cuts down not only on the contractor's costs to come in and with the as-builts and haul items there and take everything out, but it also saves a ton of money on the per cubic yard inspection fees. So the benefits of this permit for the township and the benefits to the people are increased ability for navigation of the city channels. So the city channels, the channels are property of the city, even though on both sides of them are private property. So ability to navigate that is important for recreational fishing, along with the people who live there to be able to get out and enjoy the bay and enjoy the ocean. The cost efficiency is a huge benefit for the city, the residents, and all of the business owners in the area. The township is able to establish relationships with the regulators, as we have Suzanne on the call, and she's the regulator that we work with. It's great to have a very good relationship with those folks, because they're the ones that can either make your life really easy or make it really hard. And then also you get to reduce your tidelands licensing fee. And this is a negotiation that can be completed between the township and the tidelands group to reduce the overall cost that there is when taking sediment out. So tidelands has a fee when you take sediment out of an area and you're selling it for profit. But since this is nuisance dredging, basically, There is an initial upfront fee that the township pays, and then a nominal fee that the township pays per year afterwards instead of paying per cubic yard. So this saves a ton of money for the township and the residents over time. And then finally, we have that beneficial use of dredge material that Alyssa talked about with our Nejecho Lagoon dredging and our Windward Beach nourishment. And then for our next steps with beneficial use, we have these two project areas here within Edwin B. Forsyth National Wildlife Refuge, with Brick's Project A in the northern side and Project B in the southern side. And this is one large project that we're hoping gets funded to enhance over 143 acres of existing coastal wetland, and it would utilize more than 120,000 cubic yards of beneficial use dredge material from the area within Brick Township, which would be excellent because we don't have to ship it away. We can keep it within the system to improve the health of the marsh. So because we have these 10-year permits, we're able to identify and permit more beneficial use projects to keep the sediment, like as I said, within the system and ensure that our marshes are healthy. So the summary of my slides here, the municipal-wide dredge permits are cost-effective. They help to maintain tourism and local economy. They allow for long-term coastal planning. The annual bathymetry is a really important tool that it's kind of like a hidden perk that you get because the annual bathymetry can act like an insurance policy for a township. Because Brick has this annual bathymetry that occurs, if we had a large storm, like if Ian made its way up here, if we had another Sandy, and there was a ton of sediment deposited, they can go and document that they had this loss or rather gain of sediment that needs to be cleared out. So they can show this to state agencies, show this to federal agencies, and actually have proof that this storm resulted in this gain of sediment and we need help with that. So it's a great fallback insurance policy, basically, to have that annual bathymetry that you're already doing for your dredging. Finally, as I talked about, it provides opportunities for beneficial use. So you can schedule your annual dredging and also schedule your beneficial use projects and try and get those permitted within that long 10-year permit and have plenty of time to find these projects and have confidence of the material to supply the actual projects. And with that, I will let Suzanne go on and I'd be happy to take any questions at the end.
Oh, Suzanne, you're still muted.
Sorry, there you go. So I wanted to start with kind of the DEP's perspective on what we're referring to as township-wide municipal dredging projects. Essentially, probably about a decade ago, our first forte into this type of permit at the municipal level was in South Jersey with Ocean City. Until the Brick Township township-wide permit was issued, we hadn't really done a lot of this type of activity up in the central part of the state. That said, since the issuance of Bricks, we have now been able to do a township-wide in Stafford. We did Little Egg Harbor Township. We have done Tuckerton. And we're kind of using this regulatory framework to issue the dredging permits, as well as recognizing that we need to structure our permits such that if an engineered with nature project, coastal resiliency project does come on the scene and has all of its necessary state and federal permits, that all that is necessary is to turn to the dredging project and say, okay, we're going to strip 20 cubic yards from Brick's dredging permit, and that material is going to go to ABC, engineered with nature project. That is a significant shift from how the department previously handled dredging projects. We always had maintained that you needed to identify all of your disposal and or beneficial use sites up front, and that we couldn't issue a permit until you had the municipality had identified where the material was going. It's kind of akin to, we didn't want barges moving around the bay without a home for the material. So I will say that from a regulatory standpoint, that was a big shift for the DEP. And I believe also the Army Corps of Engineers was able to issue their permits with a kind of a, put a pin in that, you know, the municipality hadn't identified where all the material was going, and that it was understood that you'd be coming back into the department for a modification of your permit once you had identified a location. So I guess I'd like to kind of, I didn't really prepare slides, but I would like to kind of show everybody, make sure everybody, can you guys see my screen? Or let me do this. I know you guys like that shark. Can you guys see that or no? Let me see.
Hi, one more time, Suzanne. I just made you co-host.
Okay. All right. Does that work? Does everybody see that?
We see the permit
Yes, we
document.
see that. Thank
Okay, great. Okay. So just want to run through kind of, again, how we are structuring these types of permits. You know, as I said, it's identifying the volume of material that is maintenance dredging, where it's coming from, the depth of dredging, which everybody's probably seen. This is pretty commonplace in any of our dredging permits. And then it goes into identifying, you know, that where, how, and when and where the material is going to be offloaded in temporary dewatering sites, and then authorizing both mechanical and hydraulically pumped removal of the dredge material. And in this particular case, there was material that was tested, and it was identified that it would be placed in the dredge hole 25 that is currently being managed by NJDOT. One of the things to really note is, again, the remaining volume we kind of left open for future beneficial use, living shoreline, engineered nature, whatever the municipality was able to come up with to manage the dredge material. We envisioned that engineered with nature project would get its own permits that would identify that I need this volume of dredge material, and we would then just modify the Brick Township permit to say, you know, 20K going to this beneficial use site. So one of the other nuances that I would like to point out is, and it's referred to typically in our dredging permits as the acceptable use determination. So as was previously mentioned, all that was done for the dredging permit was a bathymetry and a grain size analysis of all the material that was to be removed. And then again, here we stripped off the initial 50K because we had sediment sample results, and this material was identified to be able to be acceptable to be used in the Dredge Hole 25 habitat restoration project. So the remaining volume, as is noted in condition number 2, is that, again, minor technical modification would come in, and with that minor technical modification for a certain volume, sediment sample results would need to be submitted in accordance with a DEP approved sediment and analysis plan, and that you would need to show us that your given beneficial use site met had all its federal, state, and local permits, and a letter of acceptance from that identified beneficial use location that they've reviewed the data and that they provide us with, the department, any site-specific conditions that would need to be met for that material to be placed at the given site. And then the last thing to point out is, again, this is kind of our catch-all that, you know, if Brick, in this case, or another municipality, wanted to change or use an alternative site, that they would need the same information for any site as is alluded to in condition number 2. So I guess the other thing to note is that we, let me just stop sharing my screen. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Am I off now? Okay, good. There we go. We are fine tuning this approach as we get different municipal dredging projects, and also, as alluded to, we do work with, once the municipality has identified a contractor to remove a certain volume of material, we do work with that contractor for them to understand what the permit allows for and what the permit is not going to allow them to do a certain type of dredging. Or we also do inspections to make sure that they are following the conditions of our permit. So that's all I have.
Samantha, this is Eric Rosina from Act Engineers as well. And one of the things I just want to point out is Suzanne has been phenomenal to work with at DEP. But one of the things that she said there was that they are recognizing that we don't have all of the beneficial reuse planned out as for the future. Army Corps has not made that nexus yet in the Philadelphia district. So unfortunately for this 1.8 million cubic yards, we had to research and provide written acceptance of material for all 1.8 million cubic yards. So we had to find disposal capacity throughout the state to make that happen. Not an easy lift, especially with the limited sampling that we had completed to date. So we did get those. We did provide those to Army Corps, as Alyssa indicated, that those permits were just issued in draft form for review. And so our DEP is really on the cutting edge of this and recognizing the difficulties that townships have had. But it really gets to build the relationships. As Nick pointed out, we're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We're working with a lot of the NGOs, looking at a lot of this back bay resiliency work that needs to be done, needs to keep the sediment in the system. But those projects take a long time to permit. So in order to identify the source of the material and be able to modify that permit on an ongoing basis, what the DEP has done here is huge. And kudos to Suzanne and her team for really making that happen.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Eric. I'd like to open the floor and the chat for anybody who has questions, any of our participants. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you to all our speakers. This is an incredible feat that you guys accomplished, and it's very new in its field. So if anybody has
Good
questions,
morning.
just raise your hand.
Hi, good morning. Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Can hear you.
Okay, great. So my name is Mark Morton, and I'm a Beach Haven resident. And just want to say thanks to all the speakers today because it's really informative. So I have a couple of questions, but first a little background. As a Beach Haven resident, my house is located at 4 Lower Little Island. It's a very unique property. we've only been there a year. And if you're familiar with Long Beach Island and sort of the views from the Bayside views, if you're at Bird and Betty's and you're looking out off the restaurant there's a little house on an island, and that's our house. We bought the house about a year ago, and what we've come to see is some kind of massive erosion that's happening around the edges, very similar to what's happening to Mordecai and some of the other islands around the area. And from what we can tell, at least from some very sort of amateur, sort of unprofessional analysis of some historical photos, is that there's possible that we've lost, maybe since the early photographs of the late 70s, maybe upwards of 50% of our island due to, say, somewhere between 50 to 25% of the island due to erosion. So right now it's sort of pegged somewhere between 4 and 6 acres. So it's not huge, but it's definitely getting smaller. So that's my background. My question is, does Long Beach Island or Beach Haven in particular have one of these municipal permits in place? And do they have this annual telemetry as discussing?
I can take this one. At this point, I would say that township-wide, no, they do not. We have been in discussions with, and it's more on the northern part of LBI, closer to Barnegat, Barnegat Light and Barnegat Inlet, of a shoal that exists in that area, and the municipality is trying to address that that shoal in that portion of that lagoon community. It's near High Bar Harbor. If that helps. But as to a township-wide bathymetry, not at this point.
Thank you for that. One last question, if I can. Could you give any advice on how one could be, how we could possibly be, one of those beneficial use sites where we could accept material from places that are dredging? So to give you an idea, Intercoastal Waterway is right near us. If there are any other projects going on, we'd like to get, somehow, indicate to people that somewhere down the road in the near future, we would like to apply for a permit to receive some of that material, if at all possible. I'm assuming that it would be easier just to barge it and dump it rather than to truck it anywhere else. Because we're a site that hopefully a potential site that could benefit from some dredge spoils. So is there advice on how we could hook up with those folks that are either planning dredge projects? Is there like a list of them, or a place where we could come into contact with those that are planning them?
My advice to you would be to get your permits in place too for your shoreline restoration. And somebody is probably more apt to tell you what's involved with that. But once you have your permits in place and you're ready to go, people who want to get rid of material will find you. It is so hard to find disposal locations. I mean, we had to secure letters from landfills saying they would take 100,000 yards here, 100,000 yards there. And I have no desire to ever use 1 yard of it. If I could find people like you, I would do that day and night, even if they were outside of Brick.
Mm-hmm. Understood. All right. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Laura, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I was gonna try to ask a question about the costs. I think Alyssa, at the beginning, you said it was looking at like $300 to $500 million or $1,000 to just do a small area of your town, and you suggested, why don't we just do permit the whole thing. So what would you estimate the cost for the permitting part, not necessarily the placement, to have cost you? And how is that getting paid for?
It was paid for out of capital improvement bonds, 15-year bonds. And I would say that estimate the cost that we're into just for getting the permit application fees and the preliminary survey and testing work, it's probably close to $500,000. It may be a little more than that. I mean, I'm trying to think. I know that if you take Nejecho out, Nejecho alone, the actual construction, we did a $300,000 special assessment ordinance just to cover the cost of that contract, and we contributed an additional $60,000 to that for the public benefit of Windward Beach. So it's not an inexpensive task, but again, we had a lot of waterfront. It was, if you were talking about spending $300,000 to do all the testing to get 5 permits for 5 locations, it's a bargain to spend $500,000 to get the whole town permitted. And granted, we're gonna have to pay more every time we make a modification based on the availability to use a new disposal location or put beneficial reuse. There's going to be other fees along the way, but we're hoping to recoup some of that costs going forward with our municipal dredge permit application.
And then I'll ask one more question too, unless somebody else wants to add more about that. Just to satisfy our environmental people that were had concerns when I brought up this topic. Are there still, again, I apologize because this is not my area of expertise, but I do believe that, there's restrictions from an environmental ecology standpoint of when you apply for a dredging permit, do all those limitations on when you can dredge, how you dredge, all those things still apply with this permit?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Go
Alyssa.
ahead, Nick. Well, I'm going to say yes. I mean, we have temporal limitations on the time of year we can dredge. I'm not going to pretend to know the specifics of when you can start in May and when you can start in June, but typically it's July 1st to December 31st is when you're allowed to dredge in general. There's also restrictions on depth, and based on what the material is composed of, where it can be put to beneficial reuse. And actually for that reason, we are actually, just to correct something that was said earlier, we are not letting homeowners apply for dredging permits. We are only letting contractors apply for dredging permits simply because I can't trust, Tommy Smith on 122 Main Street to come in and get a permit and comply. I need a contractor that's bonded, has insurance, has a license that, I need collateral in order to use the township permit. It's a safety precaution. So once a contractor has a permit to dredge 122 Main Street, if he wants to add people onto his permit for 124, 126, 128 and go all the way up the street, he's allowed to do that. But it can't be like the Joneses, the Smiths, the Clarences, and I need somebody with stake in the game to be the permit applicant.
I'll just add to that. There's one of the conditions that are within some of the permits, federal and the state, also include environmental monitoring that needs to be done before and after dredge activities. In some circumstances, there's lots of conditions within the permit that are environmentally based for one reason or another, one threatened endangered species or plant or another, and evaluations that need to be done. So, but all those are very project specific and very area specific. So we get the overall permits in place, and then we design each one as it comes, as the money is available. But to answer the bigger question, which I think you were alluding to but didn't ask, as a rule of thumb, the larger the dredging project or placement project for that matter, the lower the unit cost. But But as a rule of thumb, we have always used something like $50 a cubic yard for hydraulic dredging and something like $100 a cubic yard for mechanical. If you size those projects down and we start pairing them up, you may end up spending, instead of paying like a placement project and a dredging project that was, as was done in Nejecho and Windward, you may end up spending $1.50 rather than $1, but you're not spending $2. And that's the overall savings to the program, is that we're doing 2 things for a savings at the same time and building resiliency in the process.
Well, if there are no more questions.
Oh, I can keep asking questions, but I would love to
Okay,
have somebody else
for it, Laura.
ask questions
Comment.
if others have interest.
Well, let me also say this, and this is anecdotal at best, but from a township perspective and from a holistic program perspective, we did this in other towns, and literally when the program began, waterfront property values increased dramatically, almost overnight. Just the fact that the town had the foresight to get it done. They were, people were selling houses on the waterfront for $100,000 more than the day before. I mean, just because the program was there, and they had access to deep water again, so you can sell the house with the boat slip that it was supposed to come with, and that adds to the township's, payback as well.
That's actually a very good point, because we're about resiliency in this community. It's going to shock some of you to learn that not every mayor or council elected official is as concerned about resiliency as they are about property values in their tax base. And by getting the permit and the availability of the permit for people to dredge, you're providing people with a benefit and saving them the money of having to do it themselves. But we were dangerously close in some of those 5 areas I started, of communities coming in with group tax appeals saying, you are taxing me on waterfront access and I don't have it. And that would have been a hit to the tax base. And that really made elected officials stand up and say, we don't want that. What can we do? Sometimes in order to get your environmental work done, you have to figure out what appeals to a lot of different people.
That was going to be one of my next questions was, how did you engage, people in the conversation, and was there resistance?
Well, when it first came up and they said, okay, let's do the hotel, and I warned the mayor and the administrator, this is going to be expensive. And they were like, it's okay. We'll put, I said, then I started coming in with bills and they were like, what? I said, I told you it was going to be expensive. But when we developed the idea of the permit program, we've already agreed that the $500,000 we spent is a sunk cost. But if I want to keep this permit going for 5 years, 10 years and continue on, I want the program to pay for itself. And I sold it that we invested the initial money to get this program up and running. But if we can collect permit fees for dredging, we can sustain the permitting forever, hopefully, for the community going forward by collecting application fees to use to pay for future soft costs like surveying and testing.
Hey, Alyssa, as a follow-up to that, this is Suzanne. Did you do any public meetings? How did you vet this with the public, I guess was a question that I had, or how'd you get it out there?
We did a public meeting and we did a marina owners meeting. And unfortunately, they were pretty well attended. But I wish the public one was better attended. It was during COVID. It was via Zoom, acted the majority of the presentation, but we did make the presentations available on the township website. And I can't tell you, as little articles have turned up in the Brick Patch or, the Shore
Yeah,
Beat.
we've been watching them too.
Yeah. Residents call me and email me today. I'm like, not today, soon. So the word is getting out there. I mean, yesterday I had a talk with Bill from from Crystal Point. So he owns 2 marinas. And he's very excited about this permit because he was about to hire, he just got prices from consultants to do his bathymetric survey, to do his maintenance dredging. He's like, I won't need to do that. I'm like, no, you won't. I mean, if you want to work under our permit, you won't. If you want your own special conditions that are above and beyond what we're permitted to do, you may, but he was ecstatic. I mean, and it sounded to me when we worked out the application fees, like I think we came up with $11,000 for marina. I was like, and then you think about what you're going to spend just in the bathymetry, the soil grain size analysis testing, and the application fees. It's probably cheaper just to come to the town and pay the application fee.
So I'll ask one last question. If you were a municipality that had not been considering this yet, taking on this sort of township-wide permitting project, what would be your first steps?
You really actually need to know like your really problematic areas. I mean, you can hire somebody to do bathymetry of the entire municipality. But it really helps if you know where your target problem areas are, because you're going to want to maybe invest in getting testing done above and beyond there. Where like we did the grain size for the entire town, but like I think I'm ready to do the sampling when needed in the 5 target areas that we talked about, the chemical analysis testing. So I mean, you want to know where your problems are, because everyone and their mother will come to you saying we're worse than they are. So if you have an idea of what the community needs are first, so it's like probably a needs assessment, but the survey is hand in hand with that. Your first step is to get the hydrographic bathymetry, the information of what material you have where.
If I were a municipality, I would reach out to another municipality first to see where they started, and then find out who did their work. And we've done it with Ocean City, we've done it with Brick, and we've also are working on finishing it with Stafford. And I'd try and find somebody who's done it before, because it is it's not lengthy, because we do have the great folks to work with at the DEP, but figuring out the core side of it is something that you definitely want experience with. So finding somebody who's done it.
I'll add that like today I represent Brick Township. Usually I'm here representing NJAFM. As a municipal official, I'm not allowed to endorse a company, but I would agree with Nick's statement.
It's a long road to get there. So navigating all that is something that you want somebody with experience doing that.
I think we started talking to ACT, I want to say it was 2019. It was probably November. It was probably this time in 2019. So it took a few years to get here.
Can I assume that your local permitting is in the form of an ordinance that I could find online on your municipal code?
You will soon, because we didn't pass the ordinances yet, because we just got our draft Army Corps permit yesterday. And I'll be happy to send it all to you. We have a draft of the ordinance, the application, the contractor pre-qualification list. I feel like there's one more thing I'm forgetting. Fee schedule. So it's all drafted and ready to go for the land use committee, but until this permit it gets signed by the administrator, we're not bringing it to council. It's already gone to land use committee. It's already been vetted. So council knows it's coming, and I don't anticipate any additional comments on it. But the ordinance won't be adopted until such time that we actually have the Army Corps permit in hand.
Further supporting the long road of not just time, but a lot of different hurdles to jump through and hoops to navigate.
And I thought about trying to get them on the books beforehand, but that's dangerous. You'll have people coming to you. They'll want the permit. Like, what if you didn't get it? What if something happened? What if there's a catastrophe? So we've come too far to not err on the side of caution.
I don't want to steal Samantha's thunder, but we will be sending out a post-chat survey in an email. But if I'm assuming our presenters will be okay with us sharing their email addresses too in that email for those that want to reach out to you guys. And of course, there's an opportunity tomorrow at 11 o'clock to meet us at Nejecho Creek and talk some more. I dropped the directions and locations in a document into the chat, but I'll also be sending out an email about the site visit If anybody has not already registered as a maybe or a yes and wants to, they can send me an email at elker@stevens.edu, which is in the chat as well. I can put it in again. Sorry, Samantha.
I am happy to have my thunder stolen by you.